Hello and welcome back to Resolutionary Leaders. Today I have Andy Campbell. He's coming to you from Bali, although not his home base, but he gets to travel because he works a lot online. He's a mindset coach and personal development teacher and speaker. His mission is to empower people through education to gain a better understanding of themselves, dissolve stress, and find the order in their perceived disorder. He helps individuals to develop leadership through mindfulness presentations, group coaching, and one-on-one consulting. Everything you do in life, you do through the medium of your mind. If you can really understand and learn how to work with your mind instead of against it, life becomes a whole lot easier. And he is dedicated to helping people better understand and master their mind. He uses an innovative transformational tool called the Demartini Method to identify and dissolve the root cause of stress perception. Andy's philosophy is that 99% of problems are created in your head by your thoughts, and that often the real problem isn't the problem itself, but rather the way you think about the problem. With his expertise and guidance, Andy helps individuals transform their mindsets and achieve greater success and fulfillment in their personal and professional lives. Welcome, Andy.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
So I love this. In fact, I was just yesterday listening to something about mindset, and it was Mel Robbins saying how look for hearts. And she was saying what you expect, what's in your consciousness is what you see. And she was saying if you start looking for hearts, you'll be shocked at how suddenly hearts are everywhere. And I was listening to it on a walk on my earbuds, and literally I went like this, and there were about 15 hearts stickers on the side of this car right beside me. I was like, good Lord, that's bizarre. So anyway, that's my story. I'll hand it over to you to help work me through some of this Demartini method. Really love to hear about how you came across it, how it's changed your life, how you use it within your work.
Yeah, I came across it initially. I wasn't really in the mindset space. I just was at university and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, kind of thing. So I was studying sports journalism at the time because I liked watching the footy, and I thought, oh, I'll write about the football. And I went to a seminar one day, and it was a 2-day seminar, and it's called the Breakthrough Experience with Demartini. I first came across his work. It was the second day of the seminar, and it was a little bit full on. I was probably 60, 70 people in a seminar room. So this was in Auckland. And Demartini was asking the room, is anyone going through grief right now? And there was a couple of people put their hand up. There's one lady that put her hand up, and she said that she broke up with her partner, and she was grieving the partner. And she said that the relationship was over and she broke up with the guy. And he said to her, if you don't get back with me, I'm going to commit suicide. And she said, no, I'm not going to get back with you. And she came home that evening and he had committed suicide. And so she put her hand up, and I was sitting there at the time, and I looked at this girl, and she could barely keep it together. She was crying so much. And I thought to myself, she's probably going to have to go through this for the rest of her life, and she's probably going to have counseling for the rest of her life. And that was my paradigm. That was my perspective at the time. And so anyway, he asked her to come up on the stage, and he gave her a microphone, and he asked her if it's okay, can I take you through a series of questions? And she said, yes, that's fine. And so she comes up the front, she sits on the stool at the front of the audience, and he starts to take her through a series of very specific questions. And at this stage, obviously, there's the grief of the ex-boyfriend that's died, but also there's the guilt. She feels like it's her fault that he's gone and done this. And so in the space of 3 hours, she completely dissolves the grief and she completely dissolves the guilt. And I'm sitting there looking at this. And when I see that, I thought, this is what I want to go and do. I want to learn this process, and I want to go and take this to as many people as possible and show them what's possible. Because I realized in that moment that the idea that I always was brought up with, which was you can never really get rid of grief, it's just something you make a part of your life, is what I was told. I realized that was just a stage of awareness, a degree of awareness that wasn't the bigger picture. And I just got a new paradigm for not only grief, but mindset for guilt and for all of these emotional charges that we go through as humans. That's how I came into it initially. When I saw it, I was one of those people that was always like jealous of people that knew what they wanted to do. And I saw people like, oh, I wish I knew what I wanted to do. When I saw that, I knew what I wanted to do. And I said, this is what I want to do. I want to take this and share this with as many people as possible. So that's how I came into it initially.
And that sounds like a bit of a sideways, something very unexpected, given you were you still studying journalism at the time, sports
Yeah, I
journalism?
was 2.5 years into sports journalism. And yeah, it wasn't expected. I heard about this seminar from a friend, and something hooked me about it. I wasn't sure what it was, but I was like, because I was living in Melbourne and it was in New Zealand. There's a few different ones, but the person told me 30 seconds about this mindset, and I thought, yeah, I really want to do this. And so as soon as I got home, I jumped on the internet and I booked it. This is something about it that I thought was interesting. But other than that, I wasn't really doing anything in the mindset space at that time.
So tell me how's it going, and tell me a little bit about how you do it in your work, how you use the method.
It's a quite a versatile tool. So it's working with perception. So you can use it for different instances. I put in my bio that everything that we interact with in life, we do it through the medium of our mind. And so that's relationships, that's our business, that's our finances, social life. If we think about it, we don't see the thing itself, we see it through our perspective and our perception of the thing. And so then when someone has a challenge, it might be a mental emotional challenge like depression or grief, or it might be a relationship challenge. It might be they're not getting on with their partner. There's a resentment for a particular individual. But then it can also be things like business, because you'll have staff that you're interacting with, for example, and like a common one is you'll have staff that kind of fit your values better than the other one. And so then when you're trying to manage that, you're not able to manage them as well, because you don't want to offend this one because you like them, and this one you won't listen to as much. And so it's all kind of relates back to mindset. The way that it works is we take the challenge that the person's working with. So let's say that maybe there's a relationship challenge and they've got maybe resentment for someone in their life. You can work with people that have not spoken to their dad for 10, 50 years, something like this, because it's all a perception, it's all a mind game. And so I'll sit down with the individual and we'll look at, okay, what is the highest priority thing that's on your mind right now? What's the thing that's taking up time and space the most? Because whatever that is for them, they've got a vision of what they love to do with their life, but to the degree they've got the emotional charge sitting in their mind, they can't see that because they're preoccupied and there's things running their mind. And so we look at, okay, what's that thing for you? And let's say it's a resentment to an individual in their life. Then we go through a series of specific questions and we're working with their perception of the person. And so if it's resentment, for example, when they think of the person, I'll get them to write down everything that they admire about the person and everything they dislike about the person. And they'll have a ratio of perception. So if they were to write down, say, 20 things they admire and 20 things that they dislike, that's a 1-to-1 ratio. So they're present with that person and they're seeing them as they are, and they're having a dialogue with the person, and there's an interaction there because they're present. If they write down, let's say, 50 things that they dislike and only 10 things they like, so that's a 1-to-5 ratio. Now they're not really seeing the person as they are. They're putting their filters over it. This is like what you said at the start there. You were walking through and you're listening and you heard about the hearts. And then you started to filter your environment and you saw the hearts on the car. They were there anyway, but
Right.
we become especially aware of them because it's in our mind. So when you've got resentment, you're filtering that person through a negative lens. And so all the things that they do in a negative are going to stand out, and they're going to have a biased awareness in your perception, and you're going to overlook the things that they're doing that are maybe positive traits.
I feel like this would be a really great activity to do when you're dating somebody, and be like, okay, if you've got it's all the good stuff, it's okay, I've got my rosy glasses on. I've got to try and find some stuff on the other side.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, because that's the thing. When you're new to dating someone, you're seeing all of the positive,
Yeah.
and then you can
Oh,
swing in
look
the
at
other
you.
side,
Yeah. Yeah.
end up seeing all the negative.
Good to be able to see it so you can at least decide if you want to take that on board. But I'd love that when you're really, and I see that a lot when people are in conflict, where they can only see everything is perceived through that negative lens. And
Yeah.
even if the person does something good, they're able to frame it in a way that is just, it's terrible.
Yeah, because that's how they're seeing the world. And so that they've got a subjective bias that this person is a bad person, or this person is a such and such a label. And so no matter what's going on, they're filtering for it.
I just want to dive into that a little bit because it does relate a lot to the work that I do when people are in conflict. And that is that when you start to feel like the person has something wrong with that you're filtering them through that lens. Once you decide that they're a fully broken, evil, bad, any of that kind of character, saying that about their character, then you only see the bad in them. And unless you're able to shift away from them being an evil or bad person, there's really no way through that. I just actually was consulting with a company with the leadership today and saying that relationship there is terminal. This woman said 8 years ago that she thinks that this other woman has a evil heart, and she said it again to me during a meeting, and her manager was there, and her manager called me up and she said that 8 years ago. Like, that's been her perspective for 8 years. So this is not something, we're not going to fix this relationship between these two. So anyway, just an interesting aside on people's perspectives of each other.
Yeah, it's interesting because that situation is, if she has an intention that she wants to change it, okay, there's something to work with. But if she's sitting there and she doesn't have a motive for it, then it can go on for 8 years sometimes, and they don't have a motive to change it. So it's not going to go anywhere unless they establish some kind of motive of, I'd like to see this person differently.
Yes, yes. And sometimes people just, they're so stuck in that belief and are so that they're attached to that belief. That's it's part of their story and their reality, and it's very difficult to let go of that belief. But like you said, if you're motivated enough, you can shift very quickly.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting when I'm working with a client and we're really digging into it, and okay, they come and they present with something that they're wanting to change about their life or wanting to change about their situation. No matter what it is, a lot of the time, if they're honest with themselves, they're in the situation because at some level they're getting something out of it. Now, it might not be the most optimal way to get what they're getting out of it, but them as a human being have found a strategy to get what they really want, and maybe they're doing it in a less optimal way.
Mm.
But when we dig into the situation and the behavior that's going on, you can look at maybe a conflict at work, and there's a standoff between two people, and that's going on for a reason. It's not just a random thing that they're both opposed to each other. There's something, if it's been going on for a long period of time, then okay, there's some kind of benefit that's coming out of that, because they're getting more benefits out of creating that dynamic than out of creating the other dynamic. And so then sometimes it's worthwhile looking at, oh, okay, so what are we getting out of this situation? Why are we continuing to create this situation, this dynamic, instead of some other dynamic? So sometimes it's interesting to look at
Mhm.
what's underlying it if the person's open to exploring it.
So I interrupted you. You were saying about the 1-to-1 and the 5-to-1 ratio. So please go back down that path.
Yeah, so we have a ratio of perception with every individual that we meet, but every event that we go through, there's a ratio, right? So everything we come across, you'll meet someone out on the street and you'll say, hey, this person's a really good person. And they'll say, oh, no, they're a really bad person. You can just look at the politics, for example. Some people are on one politician's side and the other people hate that politician, and on the other politician's side. They're both, it depends on what media channel they're watching, but they're both seeing a similar individual,
Yeah.
but they've got a skewed view on the person. And so it's not the person itself, it's our perception of the person that we're dealing with. And that exercise, writing down all the good things about them or the bad things, it's just a very basic way to get a quick read on, okay, is this person somewhat objective, or are they absolutely polarized and emotional and not really seeing what's actually there?
Mm.
That's a good way to get a read on that. And then once you get an idea of where the ratio is, if it's 1-to-1, you're objective and you're present. When it starts to get out to 1-to-7, then you're you've got an intuition in the back of your mind that kind of tells you that there must be, when you meet the new partner for the first time and they're all good and no bad, your intuition's, oh, there's got to be a downside here somewhere. Once it gets past 1 to 7, that starts to turn off and you start to become absolutely ignorant, and yeah, you're just reactive. You're in your animal mind at that point, and you're just reacting with either seeking them or avoiding them. Whereas when you're 1 to 1, you're more in that governed state of mind where you're able to have control of yourself rather than reacting to the other individual as an animal in a sense.
Mm, that makes sense. Okay, I feel like I disrupted your process. You were using it like that. So I hear you're saying about perception, and you're perceiving, you help people to make breakthroughs by working on their lens, basically, their perception. So it sounds like there's a lot of reframing when you're working with somebody, challenging the perspective and helping them to reframe the situation to be more balanced and out of that animal mind into the one-on-one ratio. Am I correct?
Yeah, 100%. You're basically you're taking, you want to take what's the action that the person's done, or what is it about the person? What's a physical trait, for example, that you're most admiring or you're most disliking, and then once you identify what it is that the person's done, then the way that I look at it is, if you're seeing the bigger picture, if you're seeing the whole, that encompasses both the positive and the negative together. And so
Mm-hmm.
I use the image of the yin yang. I think that's just a good visual image. I think that's got different religious connotations to it, but I just look at that and I say everything's got both, right? And if we see the bigger picture, we see both sides. But then the emotional charges develop when we zoom into one side or the other. And so as a metaphor, when you've got someone that's seeing someone as that evil person that you described earlier, that person's focused in and they've zoomed in so much on the negative side of that individual that I picture that yin yang, and everything's black. They've zoomed in so far into the black. And so my questions are then helping them to take a step back and to zoom back out, and so they can see the black and the white, and they can see both sides of the person. And so those questions are the opposite of what you would normally ask. Traditional, in a therapy situation, you might go into the therapist's office. I've only had this experience one time, and I went in there. This was at university, and I was working with a therapist, and the therapist said, "Oh, what's going on?" And I said, "Oh, this is the issue." And they said, "How did that make you feel?" And I said, "Oh, I feel bad about it." And so the traditional approach is, okay, something's happened, and it presupposes it's a bad thing, and tell us about your feelings about it. And okay, it's a bad thing, and here's how I feel. So what I'm doing with this approach is it's the opposite of this. So something's happened, I'm presupposing it's a bad thing. Okay, great. Let's go on and find the other side of that, because everything's got both sides. There's a universal principle. There's a positive and negative, one without the other. And so the questioning process is making you do a 180. And in your head, there is no upside to this individual or this situation, because that's in your unconscious mind. And so the questions are designed to bring the unconscious information into your conscious awareness. And only then are you going to see both sides of the situation, and you're going to be able to move through it then. But if we just keep looking at how you're feeling about the negative thing, it's not really going to get us to that point where we're appreciating it as it is, because we're going to remain in, say, a lopsided perspective of our situation. So the questions are designed to explore that unconscious side that's sitting there, but must be there to create a whole situation, if you like.
So what kind of questions are they?
So we're looking at, for example, the first thing we're looking at is there's a universal principle of reflection. Basically, everything you see in other people, you have in yourself. So everyone is a mirror of you. And so if you've got a exaggerated emotional charge relative to someone, it's either you really got them down in the pit or you really got them up on a pedestal. And so you might meet someone that's meeting a celebrity that they really look up to, and when they meet the person, won't be able to speak sometimes, and they'll be so enamored with the person. And typically when you meet someone in that situation, if you have them on a pedestal, you're going to minimize what you want to say and you repress what you want to say, because you don't want to you have a fear of loss of them, and you want to keep them around, and so you minimize yourself and you exaggerate them, and you do whatever they want to do to keep them around. And so then in that situation, we're looking at, okay, the first question we're looking at is the principle reflection. So what is it you're admiring in them? And then we're looking at, where do you have that in your own form, in your own life? Because everything, for you to be able to perceive it in someone else, you wouldn't even relate to it unless you have that in your own life. But you're overlooking yours, you're unconscious of where you do it, and you're obviously conscious of where they're doing it and admiring them. So that's the first thing. If we can start to own that, yes, I do this as well. And if it's a negative thing that you're owning, or a quote unquote negative thing, until we see both sides of it, seeing that, hey, I do that too, takes a lot of the pressure off it. Or seeing I do that positive thing that I admire takes a lot of that charge out of that situation of admiration, because you see, hey, I'm a human being and I have that as well. So that's the first step, is owning what you see in others. And then we're working with the polarity of the situation. So then we're going and looking at finding, if it's a negative thing, we're going and finding, how is it a benefit to you? How's it serving your life in some way? How's it making you stronger? What are you learning from the situation? So we're focusing on going and finding the positive elements to it. And then there's also a question where we're going and looking at dissolving the label of the person. So you've got a label that this person's always mean, for example.
Yeah.
So then we're going looking at, okay, we'll go to specific times in your life where this person has been nice. And if they've got a real emotional charge going on, they say, oh no, they're a mean person and they've never been nice, and they're always mean to me, and they're nice to everyone else, but they're always mean. And so then we're sticking with the question. And if you have more certainty than the person that's got the disordered perception, then eventually they look at you and they go, oh, you're not joking. And they start to look and they start to find where the person's being nice. And eventually we tend to find what we're looking for. And so if they're looking for where's the person nice, they're going to start to see the moments where they're nice. And they say, oh, they've been nice the whole time, I just never see it before. And when they look for it, they find it. And then they say, oh, they're both mean and nice. And then they'll get to the point where that label dissolves and it's no longer a mean person. It's just they were mean, but I was ignoring where they were nice. And then when I decided to look for it, I found it. And now I see both sides of the individual. Yeah, you're also going through to dissolve the label by looking for the other side. And then there's also a separate questioning process, which is working on the grief, if someone's got grief of a person. And so this one works on a physics principle. And the physics principle is the third law of thermodynamics, which is energy can never be created or destroyed. It can only be transformed or changed in form.
Mm-hmm.
So that's applied to human behavior. So when someone is grieving the death of someone, that person's now left their life. And you're looking at, okay, what specifically, because when someone dies, you don't miss all of the person, you'll miss parts of the person. You're not going to miss where they were having arguments with you. You're not going to miss where they're telling you what to do. You're probably going to miss the sense of humor and the cuddles and the adventures together. And so if we really look at it, part of us is relieved I don't have to put up with these yelling at me traits and then the so-called negative traits. And then part of us has got grief because now I don't have these things that I really admired. So then socially, it's only socially acceptable to show that the grief side. And so then people can sometimes get caught in that. But we're looking for the transformation of energy. And so then we're looking for who's now coming into your life with the sense of humor. And they'll start to look for it again, and they'll realize that, oh, I start to I'm talking to my brother a lot more now. And when this person was in my life, I was consumed in them, but now my brother's sending me these memes, and oh, I've got this friend and he talks to me on the phone and he's starting to be really funny. And there's these two people at work, and they'll realize it's gone from the concentrated one and now it's gone into many, and it's fractionated out into maybe 3 or 8 or 10 people or something. And the analogy I give of it is, it's like there's a grief because we're focused on the old form, which is often a concentrated form of one person. And now it's in multiple people and it adds up to that one. And the analogy is you're going into the cupboard or the fridge and you're looking for the tomato sauce, wherever you keep your tomato sauce. And you're looking for, say, a red squeezy bottle of tomato sauce. And you're looking at it and you can't see it anywhere. And you call over your partner or your friend and you say, where's the tomato sauce? I can't see it. And they come over and they grab it straight away and they give it to you. And the tomato sauce is in a glass jar. And because you weren't looking for a glass jar, you never saw the glass jar, but it was in front of you the whole time. But you were filtering your environment for a red plastic squeezy bottle of tomato sauce, and so you didn't see it. And you thought it's missing, but it's just that we were looking for a different form and we didn't recognize the form that was there. So this is the questioning process for grief. It's going and looking for who's now taking on that new form. And then once you find it, obviously there's an attachment to the old form. So you want to go and bring into your conscious awareness what were all the drawbacks of that form that you're attached to. And typically they'll say, there's no downsides. It was great. I really enjoyed the adventures with them and whatnot. And if they're really willing to let go of the attachment, they'll start to look for the equal and opposite downside of the character trait they admired. And when they see the downside and the upside to the same degree, they're no longer attached to it and they need to have it, but they're now in a place where I now have an appreciation for them. It's not a needing them. It's not a infatuation. It's not a when they're gone, I'm messaging them all the time because I need to have them and I attach. But it's a place of I appreciate them for who they are. I see both sides of them, and that's the real perfection. And that's who I'm really grateful for. And so when they see both, they come to that place for the person and they just have an appreciation for the role that they've played in their life. And then we go and look at, okay, new people that are doing this trait that we looked for. So we may have looked for the sense of humor, these individuals, what's the benefit of these people doing it? And so they're taking those people out of the pit relative to the person they're admiring, who we took off the pedestal. And now you're seeing that, okay, the person I used to admire, they had the sense of humor. These new people have the sense of humor, but you're seeing them all at a level positioning. So you're not looking up to one and down on the other, but you're seeing them all as equal. And so now you're appreciating that, okay, that thing that I thought I was grieving, it's not missing. These people are providing it. And I've taken the emotional charge off it. So I'm not attached to this one, needing to have this one. I'm now appreciating the other forms that are in my life. And so at that point, you then process the grief. And so sometimes it's something that you need to experience, because I remember when I went to that seminar one time, I came home and I told someone about it and they said, oh, okay, that's interesting. And you don't believe it unless you see it for yourself. But that's the process that I'm using for dissolving grief.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because I think there's grief, and not even just with people, but with grief around the loss of a job, grief around not having the childhood that you deserved. There's certain grief that's attached to a story. And I see it like that people get married and they have this happily ever after story, and it doesn't happen. And there's a grief that happens when you're letting go of the story that you'd got attached to. I know I had that with this job, that I started this job and it was this dream job. And when I started to realize it wasn't the dream job and it wasn't something that I was going to be able to stay in, I definitely had a sense of grief. And part of it was reconciling what you're saying about I was only looking at all the good things, and I'm looking through this one frame of how fabulous everything is, and I was just ignoring all of the other bits. And it took me to be able to see the truth of the story rather than the story that I'd made up in my mind, for me to be okay letting it go. So
Yeah.
I do completely, I'm tracking what you're saying, and I'm liking it a lot. It's particularly the red sauce, the ketchup, the tomato sauce. Ketchup, as we say in America, but tomato sauce, as we say in New Zealand and Australia, that you're looking for it in a different jar.
Yeah, that's it. You find what you're looking for. Sometimes you don't recognize the new form of it though.
Yeah, that is fabulous. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking me through that. I think there was some really incredible insights that I will listen to again. Now, your website is Breakthrough Coaching, or Andy Campbell Breakthrough Coaching. What is your website?
Website is andycampbell.com.au.
Oh, so andycampbell.au.
.com.au.
.com.au. That's how it is in Australia. I feel like I need to hire you for that story I was telling you about the woman who thinks that her co-worker's evil. It'd be
Yeah.
great if she could change that story. And I can see how that your process would help her. So thank you so much for your time and enjoy Bali. How wonderful to be traveling like you are. And you've got, I know it's 6:30 in the morning, so you've got your whole day ahead of you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's early time zone over here, but thanks for the conversation. And it's an interesting process. So you can, no matter what's going on, it's not what happens to you, but it's how you choose to perceive it. So you can always work with your perception and shift the situation.
Yeah, it's that. And it's the fact that understanding the brain and understanding that the brain will see what you expect to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Your expectations and your intentions are going to override that filtering process, and then you're expecting to see it like you say, and see, because you're expecting to see it, you're then filtering for it, and then that's what comes into your awareness. That's interesting like that.
It's wonderful. Great news. All right. Thank you so much, Andy. And I will look forward to speaking to you again soon. Bye.
Amazing. Thanks, Helena. Good to have a conversation with you this morning.